What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about whether the additions and changes into Dead Space's remake will help or hurt the game. So let's start with his voice, Isaac's voice, and this is a thing that I've seen, obviously, around the internet. I do think generally people are pretty okay with it. I think, I've kind of settled on, I'm still a little concerned, like, how it's going to play out and where they will decide to insert his voice. But overall, I don't think it's going to change all that much. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I think at worst, and people have kind of pointed this out in some of the IGN first footage of Dead Space, is like, all it's going to do is where he doesn't talk now, it's going to maybe make that a little bit more awkward. Like in the beginning, when the crew kind of gets like absolutely destroyed in front of his eyes. In the original, he doesn't speak, period. So it's not that out of character to not speak there. Is it weird? Yeah, probably. But now you have in the Dead Space remake, they get destroyed in front of him. He can talk, and then he doesn't talk. So it's actually weird almost for a different reason. So I mean, it maybe will actually come off a little bit comedic in that sense, but I'm not too worried about it. I'm just more interested, I guess, in when they're going to decide to insert his voice. When is he actually going to talk? Point number two, I want to talk about whether it's going to hurt or help. I do want to talk about the face changes. So they've done some stuff with actually a number of characters, but Isaac and Nicole tend to be two of the biggest ones that people have focused on. Nicole looks substantially older than she did in the original Dead Space, and Isaac, for whatever reason, actually looks substantially younger. He looks less wrinkled, less gray, less like beaten down, and kind of more like freshened up. So they kind of went in opposite directions for both of them. I'm not the biggest fan of either. At the same time, with Isaac, the mask is going to be on him for most of the game. And then Nicole is more tough, right? Because, well, number one, Nicole's not in the game too much in the original, but she actually may be in it more now because of side missions that I want to talk about as well as part of this video. So this one can definitely go either way depending on how, like, in our face that these characters are. I'm not the biggest fan, I'll just be flat out honest, of either of those face changes, but I'll tolerate them, I guess, for the purpose of this game. But, I just mentioned side missions, so let's go into that. That is a new thing. So, you look at what they have changed. In terms of the main story, they haven't changed all that much. It's really, really close to the original. But when you look at additions, story additions, they have done those, and they've added side stuff or side missions, like literally, to kind of flesh out the other characters, the side characters. And one of those side characters will be the Nicole one. That's why I mentioned her earlier. So this is one that, when you are just taking the game and you're porting it over and you're changing engine and stuff, it's kind of hard to mess that up, right? Because you're just trying to make it for like the modern console. You're trying to like, lift everything up, but you're not adding new stuff. So when you add new stuff, you do have the potential to make it either good or bad, right? And I would expect, or I would hope, to see in reviews for this game, okay, they did a really, really good job of just recreating the game, but they also took it, upon themselves to add stuff to it. Now, the reason this could also very much be an addition, well, a couple things. Number one, it could just be good content. Number two, it's also more content. So you think about the original Dead Space, not the longest game. Now, maybe that's a byproduct of the industry that every game needs to be like 500 hours nowadays, and maybe that kind of gets in it where it's like, well, do we want to ship a game that's a remake with no added things? The game's going to come in at, what, like 8, 10, 12 hours? I mean, if we add some side missions, maybe we can stretch that out. I have a feeling that is part of the idea, but I also do think I would give them credit. I do think part of it also would be that they do want to say, hey, there were some really cool characters in this game that really weren't in it all that much, or they were in it and then they kind of just disappeared. So let's kind of give them more, to do in this one. And so again, it could go either way. I'm hoping it goes good because you're expanding the length of the game, which I think could be a positive for a lot of people. And then also if it's just good content, more good content in the Dead Space world, in Dead Space 1, I think that could potentially be a good thing. And for the final point, I want to talk about the Intensity Director. I think that's what they're calling it, the official kind of name for it. And this is that kind of automatic system that they've programmed into the game to randomize things, to spawn enemies in different places, to mess with lighting, mess with fog, mess with pacing, mess with all that kind of like jump scares, all that kind of stuff. And it's randomized. It's to make sure that there's not too much basically downtime in your game, and something will always be kind of popping off and something will always be different. I think they said there's like 1,200 different variations, and then there's also combinations that you can do those variations in, so the number is bigger. And I think this is obviously in addition to the game. Now, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. I recall in the original Dead Space there was some sort of engine that could randomize, but it wasn't, I don't think it was this robust. But I do remember, like, early on when you're playing Dead Space, sometimes enemies will attack and come out of different vents, and there was a lot of talk back when that came out, that was maybe it was somewhat new, or it was just something maybe that was emphasized for a game like this, about how well they did it, where you would kind of get attacked or jump scared from a different, angle or different spot than you did if you died and you replayed the mission. So I think they already had something somewhat like this, but this is obviously an evolution. I would call this an addition, right? Because it's something they've kind of inserted into the game. This one, I think it'd be very hard to make this a negative. You know what I mean? So if we're looking at, what could be positives and negatives, I think this one probably is overwhelmingly a positive, basically just for the reasons of what I described it as. I think it's just a really cool mechanic, and as long as the engine works, as long as the system works, and I mean, there are ways, I guess, for it to go wrong. Like, enemy spawning is a part of it, right? So I don't know how much playtesting they've done and, bug fixes. Hopefully they've done enough, right? Because, well, if enemies are kind of spawned into really annoying spots or stupid spots that just don't work, because it's randomized, maybe does that happen and it's not supposed to happen, so that kind of ruins the level you're in. So things like that, obviously you'd have to watch out for. But overwhelmingly, I do think that would be a positive to this game. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.